I was no one, just a nameless wanderer with ash on my hands and fire buried in my blood, until the Emberblade chose me. Now, haunted by ancient whispers and hunted by monsters not born of this world, I must carry the last hope of a dying realm across shattered kingdoms and cursed skies. Every step I take pulls me deeper into a war older than time itself, where gods have fallen, heroes have burned, and the truth behind the fire could either save us, or consume everything. This isn't just a tale of swords and monsters, it's the story of the fire that refuses to die. Are you ready to follow the spark? They say the world ended on a clear night. No storms. No omens. Just a sky full of stars and the hum of forge fire in my ears. I remember the hiss of quenching steel, the tang of iron on my tongue, and the ache in my arms from hammering out sword after sword for a war we hadn't yet named. I was nobody back then, just Kale, son of a blacksmith in the outer ring of Blackholt, the iron city of the north. Our walls had never been breached, not in 1,000 years. We thought ourselves untouchable, protected by steel, by honor, by tradition. But traditions are fragile things. The first sign came with the ground. A tremor, subtle and low, like a distant war drum. Then the heat, a sudden wave that rolled in like a fever, curling the hair on my arms. By the time I stepped outside, the sky was already bleeding. A streak of fire cut through the heavens, followed by another. Then another. At first, I thought it was a meteor storm. But meteors don't change direction. And they don't scream. People poured into the streets. Shouts of wonder turned to screams of panic as the flames descended, massive, winged shapes trailing smoke in molten fury. They struck the towers first, melting them like wax. The outer ring was next. My home. My father pushed me into the root cellar before the fire hit. The last thing I saw was his silhouette against the blaze, hammer raised like it could strike down the gods themselves. He didn't make it. When I clawed my way out, the city was ash. Streets I'd walked every day were now scorched craters. Soldiers, our finest, were nothing but charred armor and bone. And above it all, circling slowly in the smoke, were the Emberborn. We'd heard of them in old stories. Beasts of living flame and fury. Bound by a pact with the kings of old, never to rise, unless the oath was broken. We thought they were myth. But someone, somewhere, must have broken the pact. And now the Emberborn had returned to finish what they'd started. I was the only survivor of Blackholt. I should have died. I wanted to. But then I heard the whisper. It came from the forge ruins, soft, persistent, almost like a heartbeat. Beneath the ashes, something glowed, a shard of blackened stone etched with ancient runes. It pulsed as I touched it, burning my palm. I saw visions, fire, war, a mountain that bled lava, and a voice calling me to the ash spire. I didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But that was the night I stopped being a blacksmith's son. That was the night I became something else. I didn't know what. Not a warrior, not yet. Not a hero, surely. But something had changed the moment I touched that shard. It pulsed in my satchel as if it had a heartbeat of its own, syncing with mine. It whispered in sleep, in silence, in fire. Always pulling, always toward the ash spire. I wandered for days through the blackened remains of Blackholt. The fires had died, but the heat clung to everything like sweat on skin. Corpses littered the streets, some still smoldering. I didn't bury them. I couldn't. There were too many. I simply covered their eyes and whispered the forge prayer my father taught me. From flame you came, to flame you return. Let the steel sing you home. By the 5th day, I reached the edge of the city walls. Or what was left of them. They'd melted into slag, crumpled like parchment. Beyond them, the forest had burned too, trees charred to bone, the earth cracked and steaming. That's where I saw her. A lone rider, barely more than a silhouette through the smoke. She moved like a shadow, swift, quiet, and deliberate. Her armor gleamed faintly, silver patterned with curling flames. I ducked behind a broken wagon and watched. She dismounted, removed her helmet, and knelt over a fallen knight. She didn't weep. She didn't even speak. Just closed his eyes and left a coin on his chest. Then she stood and turned her head slightly, toward me. "You can stop hiding, boy," she said. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be ash." I stepped out slowly, hands raised. "I'm not a threat." She looked me over, brow furrowing. "Blackholt? You're a survivor. The only one." She nodded once. No surprise. No pity. "Then the stories are true. The Emberborn have returned." I hesitated. "You knew about them?" She scoffed. "Everyone in the old guard knows. The pact is written in fire and blood." "What pact?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward me and held out her hand. "Name's Saris. I was riding to Blackholt to find proof. Looks like I found you instead." I didn't take her hand. "Kale. Kale," she repeated. "Well then, Kale, come with me. If you've truly seen them, you'll want to know who summoned them. And why." I looked past her, to the forest's edge, where the land cracked like old pottery and heat shimmered in the air. And beyond that, always calling, was the whisper of the shard. I nodded. "I'll come. But first, we need to find out what this is." I pulled the blackened stone from my satchel. Sarah stared. Her face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" "It was under the forge. It called to me." She stepped back. "That's a shard of flame binding. A piece of the old bond. Only the kings of the Ember pact ever held them." I looked at the shard again. Its runes flared with silent fire. I was no king. But the shard had chosen me. And that terrified Saris more than anything else. She backed away like I held a serpent instead of a stone. Her hand drifted to the hilt of her blade, instinct, not threat, but the message was clear. The shard wasn't just rare. It was dangerous. "No one carries a flame-binding shard unless they're bound to the Ember pact," she said quietly. "But the pact was sealed with the blood of kings. You're no royal. Do I look royal to you?" I held it up. The runes shimmered, flickering like embers in a dying fire. "I didn't choose it. It found me." "That's what I'm afraid of," she muttered. I could feel it now more clearly, heat pulsing under my skin, not painful, but ever present. Like a forge always glowing in the back of my soul. Saris finally sheathed her blade and motioned for me to follow. "Come. We need answers. And there's one place left that might still have them." "Where?" "The Vault of Sindral." I blinked. I thought that was a myth. So were the Emberborn. We rode west for 2 days, avoiding the roads, cutting through the scorched remnants of farmland and abandoned villages. Smoke still drifted from some ruins, and ash covered everything like snowfall. No birds. No beasts. Just silence and the crunch of hooves on charred earth. On the 3rd day, we reached the edge of the Sindral Wastes, a sun-blasted plain of black glass and bone where an ancient war once scorched the sky. At its center stood a jagged hill of obsidian, the vault. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a ruined fortress. But the vault looked like a wound in the world, split by fire and time, with steps leading down into the dark. Saris lit a torch. "Stay close. And whatever you do, don't touch the walls." The descent was narrow, the air thick with dust and heat. Carvings lined the passage, ancient figures in battle, a burning mountain, and finally, men kneeling before beasts of flame. "The Emberborn," I whispered. "They were once guardians," Saris said. "Not monsters. They protected Ardevan. But their price was steep: obedience, respect, and flame-born tribute. When the kings rebelled and took their fire for themselves, the pact was sealed in betrayal. We reached the bottom. A circular chamber opened before us, filled with faded scrolls, rusted relics, and in its center, a dais of molten rock, still warm after centuries. I stepped forward. The shard in my hand flared. The rock answered. A symbol burned across the dais, a perfect match to the one on my shard. Ceres cursed under her breath. It's true. The flame-bound have returned. What does that mean? I asked. She looked at me, eyes hard. It means the pact is still alive. And someone, maybe you, has the power to restore it, or destroy it. Then the ground trembled. A deep, guttural roar echoed from the tunnel behind us. And from the darkness, crawling on 6 burning limbs, came a creature of coal and cinders, a cindervore. It had found us. The cindervore crawled into the chamber like a living avalanche, its obsidian claws scraping sparks from the stone, its molten eyes fixed on the shard in my hand. I'd never seen a creature so impossibly large, like a beast forged from a furnace and hatred. Run! Ceres shouted, drawing her blade. I didn't need to be told twice. The vault shook as we sprinted down a narrow passage opposite the one we came through. Behind us, the cindervore roared, and the heat that followed was enough to blister the skin on my neck. The stone corridor began to melt in places, dripping like candle wax. Ceres threw a vial behind us, alchemical fire. The explosion shook the vault and slowed the beast, but I knew it wouldn't stop for long. Nothing that big and angry stopped until it burned everything in its path. Why is it after me? I shouted over the rumble. The shard, she snapped. You're flame-bound now. The Emberborn and their spawn can sense you. That was new. And horrifying. We burst into a side chamber, a storage room with crumbling scrolls and charred remains of what might have been monks or scholars. The door was thick stone reinforced with iron. Ceres slammed it shut and dropped the heavy bolt across it. The sound of the cindervore crashing through the tunnels echoed closer, like thunder wrapped in fire. We won't hold it for long, she said, breathing hard. We need to move. There's a back exit. Old, half-collapsed, but it's our only chance. I followed her deeper through the shadows, past murals of ancient kings kneeling before flaming beasts, past long-dead oaths etched into stone. We reached a narrow shaft choked with rubble. Climb, Ceres ordered. Now. The shard pulsed violently in my pouch as I scrambled upward. The heat from below was unbearable. I felt it in my teeth. Heard the cracking of stone and the grinding fury of claws below. Then, the shaft exploded. I was thrown into the sunlight, landing hard on cracked black soil. Ceres followed an instant later, coughing, bleeding from her shoulder. Behind us, the vault shuddered, and then collapsed, burying the cindervore beneath a mountain of its own fury. We lay in silence for a long time, staring at the rising smoke. Then Ceres turned her head toward me. We need allies. I didn't argue. I know a place, she continued. A hidden fortress. A remnant of the old order. If any still live, they might know how to stop this. Or at least buy us time. I looked at the smoldering ruin of the vault. The shard isn't just calling the Emberborn, I said quietly. It's waking them. Ceres nodded grimly. Then we'd better find out how to put them back to sleep. Ceres wasted no time. We rode north before the ash had settled, through the brittle remains of the old empire, burned villages, shattered statues, and fields now overrun by fireweed. The land bore scars of something ancient stirring, something vast. It wasn't just the Emberborn waking. The world itself seemed to be remembering fire. We made for Caldrith Hold, a fortress buried in the cliffs of the Gravenreach Mountains. It once belonged to the Order of the Ashguard, a forgotten brotherhood sworn to the Ember Pact. They had vanished generations ago, after the last king dishonored the flame. If any remnants remained, Ceres believed they would be there. On the fourth night, we saw the peaks rising ahead, jagged and snow-laced. Cold winds swept across the plains, strange, after so much heat, but Ceres warned me that the mountains were no safer. Some Emberborn don't burn, she said grimly. Some freeze. By the time we reached the mountain pass, the air was sharp with frost and the trees were coated in rime. The contrast felt unnatural, like winter had been dragged here by force. We're close, Ceres whispered. That's when we found the first corpse. A scout, half buried in snow, his armor scorched on one side and frozen on the other. His face was twisted in a scream. Carved into the tree above him was a single rune, marked with claw and fire. Ceres went pale. Frost flame. What is it? A rare Emberborn. Ice and fire in one body. Temperamental. Territorial. And incredibly hard to kill. As we pressed forward, the wind howled louder, and I felt the shard pulse harder against my chest, like it recognized something nearby. Something old. Something angry. At last, we reached the broken gates of Caldrith Hold. The fortress had been carved into the cliffside, its towers half collapsed and crusted with ice. Yet the central gate stood firm, closed by a massive stone seal, etched with 7 flames. The mark of the Ash Guard. Ceres approached and pressed her hand against it. Help me, she said. Together, we shoved with all our strength. The seal groaned and slid open just enough for us to squeeze through. Inside, silence. Dust floated in the air like ash. Sconces lined the stone halls, but none were lit. We moved slowly, past ancient banners and blackened armor stands. Then we heard the voice. Who disturbs the dead flame? A figure stepped from the shadows, cloaked in gray, eyes glowing faintly orange, one hand resting on the hilt of a blade that shimmered with emberlight. Ceres lowered her hood. Knight Commander Aldrin, she said. I thought you were dead. He looked at her, then at me. And when his eyes found the shard at my chest, his expression changed. You carry the Ember's mark, he said slowly. Then the world has truly begun to burn. Aldrin's words struck like cold steel. He stepped closer, boots echoing against the stone floor of the ancient hall. Even in shadow, the man radiated authority, like a sword that had never gone dull. His cloak bore the faded insignia of the Ash Guard, 7 tongues of flame circling a shattered crown. I thought the Ember pact had ended, I said. He stopped a few paces away, eyes narrowing. So did we. But fire remembers. Ceres nodded. We found the vault of Sindral. It was still active. And guarded. By what? Aldrin asked. A Cindervore, she said grimly. It almost killed us. His jaw tightened. They were bred to protect the old knowledge. If they're awake, then so are others. He turned to me. And the shard you carry, where did you find it? In the ruins of Blackholt, I said. Under the forge. Aldrin looked to Ceres, then back to me. Do you know what it means, boy? I shook my head. Only that it burns, even when it shouldn't. He reached forward slowly. May I? Reluctantly, I handed him the shard. He held it in his palm, and the runes blazed bright. This is not just a relic. It is a key. One of the original 7 flame-binding shards, bound by the blood of the first Emberkings. They tether the pact to our world, and to the Emberborn. Why me? I asked. Why would it choose me? Aldrin stared at me for a long time. Because the pact is broken. And the shards are seeking new vessels. Ceres glanced at him. How many shards are still out there? 6, Aldrin said. Scattered. Lost. Guarded. A chill ran through me. If someone finds the others, they could rebuild the Ember Pact, he said, or twist it into something far worse. Silence settled between us. Then Aldrin turned and motioned for us to follow. "Come. There's something you need to see." He led us through the ruined fortress, deeper into the mountain's heart. We passed halls lined with forgotten weapons, training grounds choked in snow, and catacombs where ancient warriors lay entombed. At last, we reached a chamber filled with statues, 7 figures in armor, each holding a flame in their hands. "The first flame-bound," Aldrin said. "Sworn to the Ember pact. Each one carried a shard like yours." He pointed to the central statue, a woman with a crown of flame and a blade of fire. Queen Mary's. The last to carry all 7 shards. She united the Emberborn under one banner. And when she died, the shards scattered. The pact faded. But it was never destroyed. Ceres stepped forward. "And now someone is awakening the Emberborn again." Aldrin nodded. "Then you must find the other shards before they do. Before the Emberborn turn the world to ash." I looked up at the statue of Queen Mary's. Her stone eyes burned with purpose even now. For the first time since Blackholt fell, I felt something solid in my chest, not just fear, but resolve. "I'll find them," I said. "All of them." Aldrin placed the shard back in my hand. "Then may the flame guide you, Kale of Blackholt," he said. "Because from this moment forward, the hunt begins." The words echoed in my head long after Aldrin had spoken them. They weren't a blessing, they were a sentence. A vow stitched with fire and ash. I wasn't just carrying a shard now. I was carrying a war. We spent the night in the lower chambers of Caldrith Hold, safe behind stone and secrecy. But sleep never came easily. Not with the weight of the shard pressed to my chest and the memory of burning eyes chasing me through the dark. At dawn, Aldrin gathered us beneath a broken dome that once overlooked the valley. Snow had drifted in, but the air was strangely warm, like the mountain remembered fire. He brought out a scroll sealed in wax, brittle with age. The shards were hidden in sacred grounds, each one protected by rites long since broken. "But I've studied the old flames. I know where the next one might lie." "Where?" I asked. "In the tomb of Ashblade Varen, one of Mary's 7. Ceres stiffened. "That tomb was sealed by the Emberkings themselves. No one has ever breached it. Because it's cursed," Aldrin said. "Guarded by a wraith of flame and sorrow, Varen himself." My stomach turned. "And we're going there?" Aldrin gave a sharp nod. "The shard he carried is called the Fong of Ember. It's bound to a warrior's rage. If you want to survive what's coming, you'll need it." And so, we left Caldrith Hold under veiled skies, armed with maps, Aldrin's blessing, and dread in our hearts. The journey took us south along the spine of cinders, a range of mountains so scorched they bled smoke when the wind blew right. The tomb of Ashblade Varen lay in a place called Furnace Hollow, an old battleground turned burial site. No birds flew there. No beasts roamed. Only silence, ash, and the bones of forgotten wars. The entrance to the tomb was a jagged arch of obsidian, half buried in molten slag. Symbols glowed faintly on the stone, words meant to keep the living out, or the dead in. Ceres lit her torch. "If he wakes, we'll have only moments." I nodded, gripping my sword tighter. The shard in my chest had begun to thrum, not in warning, but in recognition. We descended into the dark. The air grew thick with soot and memory. Along the walls, ancient carvings showed Varen's battles, his duel against a Drakeborn general, his defense of the Ember Queen, his final stand surrounded by a tide of enemies. Then we reached the burial chamber. At its center stood a black sarcophagus, chained with molten iron, its surface etched with fire runes that pulsed faintly. I stepped closer. And the moment I did, the chamber flared to life. The chains snapped. The lid exploded outward. And from within, wrapped in broken armor and crowned in flame, rose the wraith of Ashblade Varen. His eyes blazed with eternal fury. "You dare enter my tomb," he roared, his voice like thunder across a battlefield. "You dare seek the Fong of Ember." "I do," I said, stepping forward. "Not for power. For survival." He lifted his sword, a massive blade of ember-forged steel, cracked but still burning. "Then prove yourself, flame-bound," he growled. "Only fire can test fire." And before I could speak again, he struck. The blow came fast, faster than any ghost should move. I barely raised my sword in time to block it. The impact rattled my bones, sent sparks flying from the clash of steel and ember. Ashblade Varen didn't fight like a spirit. He fought like a storm. Each swing of his blade screamed with heat. He moved with fury, not malice, with purpose, not hatred. This wasn't vengeance. This was judgment. "You carry a shard, but you do not understand it," he roared, striking again. "You think the flame is a weapon. It is a burden." I stumbled back, boots scraping over molten stone. The chamber glowed with ancient fire, shadows leaping like dancers on the walls. Ceres shouted something behind me, but her voice was drowned in the ringing of my ears and the roar of the wraith. I had no choice. I gritted my teeth, and let the shard burn. It flared in my chest like a second heart. Heat coursed through my veins, unnatural and wild, but I grabbed it, pulled it inward. And then I swung. My blade caught Varen's mid-arc. For a breathless moment, the two of us stood locked, emberlight flaring between us like a dying sun. His eyes narrowed. "Good." He twisted, broke the lock, and struck again. I ducked, rolled, came up swinging. The flame within me surged. I didn't master it, it mastered me, but in that moment, I didn't care. I fought not like a swordsman, but like something burning. When I finally landed a strike, cutting across his chest where no blood flowed, he staggered back. Fire spilled from the wound, and the sarcophagus behind him cracked open with a deep, echoing groan. The shard answered. Varen knelt, one hand on the stone floor, the emberlight in his body flickering. "Enough," he rasped. "You are not ready, but you are willing. And that is the first step." His body began to fade, breaking apart into ash and light. But his voice lingered. "Take the fawn. Bear it not as a weapon, but as a warning." And with that, he was gone. Where his wraith had stood, the Fong of Ember now floated in midair, a shard like a blade fragment, jagged and searing, humming with power. I reached out and took it. The moment I touched it, fire filled my mind. Images flashed, memories not my own, Varen's final battle, the screams of burning skies, the Ember Queen's fall. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, Ceres was beside me, watching with wary awe. "You did it," she said. "You earned it." "I don't know if I did," I murmured. "I just survived it." We climbed from the tomb as dawn broke over Furnace Hollow, the air strangely calm. But in my chest, the second shard burned beside the first. 2 of 7. And already, I could feel the others stirring, like sparks on the edge of a dry wind. The shards were waking, and so were the dangers that hunted them. We made camp near the edge of Furnace Hollow, beneath a twisted grove of charred trees. The cold morning air bit at my skin, but inside me, the shards pulsed warmly, almost like a heartbeat. Ceres was sharpening her blade, eyes scanning the horizon. "We're not alone," she said quietly. I nodded. The Emberborn weren't the only ones drawn to the shards. Word of the Flamebound had spread through whispers and shadow. Mercenaries, cultists, and worse, all eager to claim the power for themselves. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush. My hand went to my sword as figures emerged, for cloaked men, faces hidden beneath dark hoods, weapons gleaming with cruel intent. "Flame-bound," one hissed. "Hand over the shards, and we might let you live." Ceres stepped forward, blade flashing in the sunlight. "You'll have to take them from us." The air thickened as tension snapped. Before I could react, the leader lunged. Steel clashed, and the battle erupted with savage fury. I fought like a man possessed, shards blazing faintly beneath my skin. The first man fell beneath Ceres's swift strikes. Another came at me, dagger raised, but I sidestepped and drove my sword through his ribs. 2 down. The leader circled, eyes cold and calculating. He struck with surprising speed, and I barely blocked the blow. Our blades met, sparks flying. "You're strong," he snarled. "But not strong enough." Suddenly, he whispered words I didn't understand. Shadows twisted around him, thickening into smoky tendrils that reached like fingers. Dark magic. My shards flared wildly, and the air around me shimmered with heat and light. "Ceres!" I shouted. "Focus on him." She nodded, eyes fierce. Together, we fought back the darkness. The leader screamed in rage as his magic burned away, and with a final strike from Ceres, he collapsed. The remaining attackers fled, leaving us breathless and bleeding. As silence returned, I realized something else. The shards had saved us. But the battle was only beginning. And the wind carried whispers of an ancient enemy awakening, one darker than fire or ice. The warning clung to the air like smoke, invisible but suffocating. As we tended to our wounds, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes watched us from the blackened trees, patient and hungry. Aldrin's words echoed in my mind, the shards were scattered for a reason. Not just to guard their power, but to keep something buried, something that now stirred with every ember we rekindled. Ceres broke the silence, her voice low. "We need to move. Quickly." Our next lead pointed us eastward, toward the Valewood, a forest shrouded in perpetual mist and shadow, a place whispered about in frightened legends. It was said the Valewood was home to the Umbral Coven, sorcerers who trafficked in darkness and death. If the shards called to the Emberborn, perhaps they also summoned those who wished to snuff out their flame forever. We rode under gray skies, the forest looming like a living beast at the horizon. The trees twisted and nodded, their branches clawing at the sky as if to choke out the sun. Crossing the Valewood's threshold felt like stepping into a dream, and a nightmare. The mist swallowed sounds, and shadows flickered at the edge of vision. Ceres's hand never left her sword. I could feel the shards pulsing faster now, as if warning me. Suddenly, a voice whispered, soft and cold, threading through the mist like a serpent's hiss. "Flame-bound, you trespass in sacred darkness." From the fog emerged figures cloaked in tattered black robes, faces hidden beneath cowls. Their eyes glowed faintly violet, unnatural and eerie. The Umbral Coven. One stepped forward, voice dripping with venom. "The Ember pact is a threat to our dominion. Surrender the shards, and your death will be swift." I gripped the fong of ember and the shard at my chest. "We will never surrender." With a flick of his wrist, the coven unleashed tendrils of shadow that wrapped around Ceres and me, cold as the grave. But the shards flared bright, searing the darkness, burning away the cold. The battle in the Valewood had begun. Shadow tendrils coiled around my arms like icy serpents, trying to drain the warmth from my body. Ceres struggled beside me, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she swung her sword to cut through the darkness. I gritted my teeth and focused on the shards, 2 flames burning inside me, fierce and relentless. The fong of ember pulsed like a heartbeat, and I let it roar to life. Suddenly, a wave of heat erupted from my chest, searing through the shadowy chains. The darkness hissed and recoiled, burning away like ash in the wind. The coven faltered. Their leader's eyes widened, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he raised his hands, summoning a vortex of night that swallowed light whole. "Flame-bound," he spat, "your fire will feed the darkness." But I could feel the shard speaking to me, urging me forward. I stepped into the swirling void, sword blazing with emberlight. With a cry, I slashed through the shadow vortex, igniting a path of flame. Ceres took the opening and charged, her blade singing through the air. One by one, the coven members fell, their dark forms dissolving into smoke. But their leader remained, retreating deeper into the mist. "Kale," Sarah said, panting, "this isn't over." I nodded, feeling the shard's fire steady inside me, a promise and a warning. The Umbral Coven was only the beginning. The forest seemed to close in tighter after their retreat, the mist thickening until it swallowed the world whole. Every step felt heavier, as if the Veilwood itself was weighing down on us, warning us to turn back. Saris and I pressed forward, following a faint trail Aldrin had marked on the old map. It led us deeper into the heart of the forest, where the trees grew ancient and twisted, their bark blackened like scorched bone. As we walked, the shard's warmth pulsed rhythmically against my chest and hand. But beneath that steady flame, I sensed something else, a faint whisper, like a voice calling from the shadows. Suddenly, the ground beneath us trembled. From the roots of the gnarled trees, glowing embers erupted, swirling into the shape of a figure cloaked in flame. "Kale," the figure spoke, voice like crackling fire, "you carry the blood of the Emberkings, but your journey has only begun." The figure stepped forward, revealing herself to be a woman clad in armor that shimmered like molten metal. Her eyes blazed with fierce determination. "I am Maris reborn," she said, "the spirit of the last Ember Queen, bound to the shards and their fate. The darkness you face is ancient and hungry. To wield the Ember pact, you must learn its true power." I felt the shards flare hotter, as if recognizing her presence. "What must I do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the weight of her gaze. "Come," she said, "and I will show you the path through fire and shadow." As she led us deeper into the Veilwood, I knew the trials ahead would test not only my strength but the very flame within my soul. The spirit of Maris moved with a grace that seemed to ripple the very air, her molten armor casting flickering light onto the twisted trees. The mist parted before her, revealing a narrow path lined with glowing embers. "This path," she said, "is the way of cinders, a journey through the memories of the Emberkings. To wield the shard's true power, you must face their pasts, their failures, and their sacrifices." I swallowed hard but followed without hesitation. Saris stayed close, ever watchful. The first trial came swiftly. Flames erupted around us, but these were not ordinary fires. They burned cold, whispering voices of those who once bore the Ember Pact. Faces formed in the smoke, heroes, villains, and everything in between. One image seared itself into my mind, a young Maris, wielding a blazing sword, standing against a horde of shadow beasts. The vision twisted, her sword shattered, her face twisted in anguish. "Failure," Maris whispered. "And yet, a lesson." The flames swirled, and I felt a hand reach for me, a ghostly touch urging me forward. "Do not fear what has been," Maris said. "But learn. The shards hold power, yes, but they demand sacrifice. You will have to decide what you are willing to burn." The path narrowed, and the fires flared higher. I felt the shards burn hotter, their light a beacon, and a warning. As I stepped forward, the whispers grew louder, the flames hotter. This was more than a trial, it was a reckoning. The flames roared around me, their heat both scorching and strangely comforting. The voices grew urgent, demanding I confront the truth buried beneath the emberlight, that power always comes at a price. Mary's spirit hovered beside me, her gaze fierce yet understanding. "You must choose, Kale," she said. "Will you let the shards consume you, or will you command their fire without losing yourself?" I clenched my fists, feeling the shards pulse violently against my skin. Images flooded my mind, visions of friends lost, cities burned, and the weight of countless sacrifices. Saris's voice cut through the chaos. "We don't have time for doubts. Darkness spreads." Her reminder anchored me. I stepped through the heart of the blaze, flames licking at my boots but not burning. With each step, the shards grew steadier, their light brighter. At the center of the fire stood a great forge, ancient and glowing. Maris reached out, and the shards lifted, merging into a brilliant blade of living flame. "This is the Emberblade," she said. "Wield it wisely. It will be your greatest strength, and your greatest test." As I took the Emberblade in hand, the fire subsided, leaving only the quiet crackle of embers. The Valewood awaited outside, darker now, but I was no longer just Kale. I was the flame-bound. And the real battle was about to begin. Stepping out of the Valewood, the world felt heavier, charged with anticipation and dread. The sun was setting behind jagged peaks, casting long shadows across the land, shadows that seemed to twist and stretch with a life of their own. Ceres glanced at me, her eyes steady despite the storm brewing ahead. "The Umbral Coven will not wait. They'll strike before we can gather the others." I gripped the Emberblade tighter, feeling its warmth seep into my bones. This was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a war for the fate of our world. "We'll need allies," I said, voice low but resolute. "Old friends, new friends, anyone who can stand against the darkness." Our path led us toward the ruined city of Draumr, once a beacon of light, now a fortress for those who opposed the Emberborn. It was there that Aldrin had mentioned a potential ally, Ira, the last of the Skyward Rangers, known for her unmatched skill and fierce loyalty. As night fell, we rode hard, the shards pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The weight of the Emberblade reminded me that I carried more than a weapon, I carried hope. And with that hope burning brighter than ever, I vowed to face whatever darkness came next. The city of Draumr rose before us like a shadow of its former glory, crumbling walls wrapped in creeping ivy, towers broken and leaning, and streets choked with the ghosts of battles long past. Yet, despite its ruin, a flicker of life remained. Lanterns glowed faintly in the windows, and figures moved silently through the mist. We approached cautiously, Ceres and I slipping through the shattered gates under the cloak of twilight. "Stay close," I whispered. "We don't know who still calls this place home." As we wound through narrow alleyways, a sharp whistle cut through the air. From the shadows, a figure dropped gracefully onto the cobblestones, a woman clad in leather armor, her keen eyes gleaming like a hawk's. "You must be Kale," she said, voice steady and clear. "Ira of the Skyward Rangers. I've heard the tales." Her presence was commanding, and I felt a surge of relief. Here was an ally, sharp and unyielding. "We need your help," I said, holding up the Emberblade. "The shards are awakening, and darkness is spreading. Will you stand with us?" Ira nodded, her gaze hardening. "For Draumr, and for what remains of this world, I will." As we prepared to leave the ruins behind, I sensed the quiet before a storm, the calm moment when every breath counts before the battle to come. The war for the Ember Pact was no longer just a legend. It was our destiny. With Ira now by our side, the weight of the coming fight felt a little less crushing, but no less real. We moved swiftly through the night, tracing the map toward the next shard's rumored resting place, the shattered fortress of Kalethorn Keep, a place where once mighty kings held court and where now shadows ruled. As dawn broke, the landscape shifted, rolling hills gave way to jagged cliffs, and the sky darkened with storm clouds gathering like an omen. Ceres rode beside me, eyes sharp. "The Coven won't wait for us to be ready. They'll strike first, and hard." Ira adjusted her bow, scanning the horizon. "Then we'll meet them head-on." Hours later, near the keep's ruined gates, we spotted signs of recent battle, broken arrows, scorched earth, and tracks that spoke of many passing feet. Suddenly, a horn shattered the silence, a warning. From the forest edge emerged a dark tide, shadowy figures clad in obsidian armor, their eyes glowing faintly with unnatural light. The Umbral Coven soldiers. With a roar, I raised the Emberblade, flames erupting to life. For the shards. For the Ember Pact. Steel met steel as the battlefield erupted in fire and fury. This was no longer just survival. This was war. The clash of steel and roar of battle swallowed everything else. Around me, the Emberblade blazed fiercely, slicing through the ranks of shadow soldiers with a fiery wrath I had only begun to understand. Ceres fought like a whirlwind, her blade a deadly dance of precision and power. Ira's arrows rained from above, each one finding its mark in the enemy's dark armor. But the enemy was relentless. Wave after wave surged forward, pushing us back toward the crumbling walls of Calethorn Keep. I felt the shards' fire burning hotter, matching the fury of the fight. The ember blade seemed alive in my hand, humming with energy, begging to be unleashed. Suddenly, a massive figure broke through the enemy lines, a towering warlord clad in blackened steel, his eyes glowing with the same unnatural violet light as the coven. He wielded a great axe, swinging it with devastating force. "Kale flame-bound," he growled, "your light will be snuffed out this day." We collided, steel against steel, fire against shadow. The warlord was strong, but the Emberblade's flames licked at his armor, melting it piece by piece. With a final, searing strike, I sent him crashing to the ground. As the enemy faltered, the soldiers began to retreat, their howls fading into the storm. Breathing heavily, I looked at my companions. This is far from over. But today, we had won. And the shards still burned bright. The battlefield lay silent but smoldering beneath a heavy sky. Broken weapons and fallen shadows scattered across the scorched earth. I dropped to my knees, exhaustion pulling at every muscle, but the fire in the Emberblade still hummed fiercely in my grasp, a reminder that the fight was far from over. Ceres stood nearby, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. "The coven will regroup. They'll come back stronger." Ira knelt beside me, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to find the final shards, and fast. If they claim them first, everything we fought for will be lost." The weight of the moment settled deep in my chest. The Ember Pact was more than a weapon or a legend, it was a responsibility that demanded sacrifice, courage, and unity. "We head for the Ashen Spires," I said, the shards pulsing with anticipation. "That's where the last fragment is said to be hidden." As we prepared to move, a sudden chill brushed my neck, a faint whisper carried by the wind, barely audible but unmistakable. "The darkness awakens," it said. The final battle was near. And with it, the fate of our world would be decided. We reached the Ashen Spires just as dawn broke, jagged peaks blackened by ancient fires, their summits piercing the blood-red sky. The air was thick with ash and magic, a place where the earth itself seemed to burn beneath our feet. The Umbral Coven awaited us at the summit, their dark forms gathered around the last shard, a crystal pulsating with a cold, eerie light that threatened to snuff out all warmth. The Coven's leader stepped forward, his eyes burning with hatred. "Give up, flame-bound. The shards belong to darkness now." But I tightened my grip on the Emberblade, feeling the fire within surge in defiance. "No," I said, voice steady and fierce. "The Ember Pact is ours, light forged through fire and sacrifice." The battle ignited with a roar, flames clashed against shadow, steel sang against steel, and the very sky seemed to fracture under the weight of our fury. I faced the Coven leader, our powers colliding in a tempest of fire and darkness. The shards burned hotter than ever, their energy coursing through me. With a final, blazing strike, I shattered the dark crystal, sending a wave of radiant flame that washed over the Ashen Spires, cleansing the darkness. The Coven screamed as their power broke, their forms dissolving into harmless ash. Exhausted but victorious, I looked at Ceres and Ira, warriors bound not just by battle, but by hope. The Ember Pact was restored. The flame would never die. And as the sun rose over the reborn world, I knew our journey had forged a new legend, one of fire, friendship, and the unyielding light within us all. The land breathed anew beneath the golden light, forests reclaiming charred soil, rivers flowing clearer than before. The scars of war remained, but they were marks of endurance, proof that even in the darkest times, hope can blaze bright. Ceres and Ira stood beside me, their faces lined with exhaustion yet shining with quiet pride. Together, we had faced the shadows, and emerged stronger. The Emberblade, now dimmed but never extinguished, hung at my side like a silent promise. I understood then that the true power of the Ember Pact was not in the shards or the flame itself, but in the bonds forged through sacrifice and courage. As the people of our world began to rebuild, I vowed to protect that flame, not just within the shards, but in every heart willing to stand against the darkness. The Ember Pact was more than a legend, it was a beacon for all who dared to carry the fire forward. And so, the flame continues, burning bright in the ashes of yesterday and the promise of tomorrow. But rebuilding a world torn by war was not a simple thing. The battles were over, yes, but the wounds ran deep. Villages still lay in ruin, trust was scarce, and fear lingered in the eyes of those who had survived. Not all darkness wears a cloak of shadow, some takes root in hearts left broken. So we rode, not as warriors, but as messengers of flame and renewal. Ceres took to the north, where frost had claimed once thriving lands. Ira journeyed east to reunite scattered ranger kin. And I returned to the place where it had all begun, Velmyra, my homeland, now little more than smoke and rubble. Walking its cracked stone paths, I felt the ghosts of old battles stirring in the wind. But amid the wreckage, I saw something else, children chasing each other through the ruins, laughter rising like sparks. The flame was still here, small but alive. I knelt beside the old central well, where once we'd gathered as a village. From beneath my cloak, I drew a shard, no longer violent or unstable, but calm. I planted it gently into the earth. Light bloomed from the soil, not fire, but warmth. Life. And for the first time in what felt like years, I smiled. Because even after all we had lost, something was growing again. That small bloom of light at the well's base became more than a symbol, it became a beginning. Word of it spread faster than I could have imagined. Refugees, farmers, warriors, even former enemies drawn by whispers of warmth that healed instead of burned. They began to gather, not to fight, but to build. They called themselves flame keepers, not for me, but for the ember within each of them. Men and women who had seen the worst of the world and still chose to believe in its best. It humbled me beyond words. But peace, I've learned, is like fire, it must be watched, fed, protected. One night, as we shared stories around a low fire, a messenger arrived. Dust-covered, half-starved, eyes wild with dread. "They've returned," he rasped. "Not the coven, something else. From the stars." The air went still. I stood slowly, feeling a faint stir in the shards still hidden beneath my cloak. Not darkness this time, but something foreign. "What did you see?" I asked him. He swallowed hard. "A rift in the sky. Creatures of bone and smoke pouring out. They devoured a city in hours. They don't want the shards. They want the flame itself." I looked to the sky then, where stars glittered with unfamiliar menace. The age of monsters was not over. It was only changing shape. The sky tore like parchment that night, no longer just stars above us, but something vast and watching. The rift shimmered with an otherworldly hue, casting an eerie glow over the camp. And from it, they came. Not creatures of shadow like the umbral coven, but entities of twisting bone and molten sinew. Their shapes defied sense, limbs where none should be, eyes that blinked in impossible rhythms. They moved with the hunger of fire and the coldness of the void. We called them the Hollowed. The first attack came swiftly. A flamekeeper outpost near the southern crags was gone in minutes. No fire. No screams. Just silence, and a scorched crater where life had once been. Ceres returned, her sword bloodied, her eyes grim. "These aren't monsters," she whispered. "They're harbingers. Scouts." Ira found ancient markings etched in the ruins, glyphs not even she, a ranger trained in the old tongues, could decipher. But one symbol repeated, a broken flame inside a circle of stars. I knew then, the Ember Pact's power wasn't born of this world. And now, its creators had come to reclaim it. So we made a choice. We would go through the rift. Not to flee, but to find answers. To face whatever waited beyond the veil. I stepped toward the swirling tear in the sky, the emberblade pulsing in my grip. And with my companions beside me, I entered the unknown. The moment we crossed the threshold of the rift, everything changed. The sky turned violet. Gravity twisted sideways. Time felt slower, or maybe it ran backward. There were no stars here, only fractured light, suspended in endless dark like shards of broken glass. We stood on a floating isle of black stone, drifting through an endless expanse. This was not a world. This was a wound in reality. Ira gasped. We're inside the Ember. And I knew she was right. It wasn't just power we carried in those shards, it was a fragment of this place. A prison. A gate. A remnant of something older than our world. Something that should have never been opened. From the void emerged shapes, beings of immense scale and silence, cloaked in shimmering bone and silver flame. They did not walk. They hovered. Observed. One of them spoke, not in words, but in pressure, like thought pressing into bone. Return what was taken. The emberblade began to scream in my hand. It knew them. It feared them. We didn't steal it, I said aloud, though I didn't know if they understood. We forged it. We bled for it. We saved lives with it. They did not care. They moved as one, reaching out, not to attack, but to take. Saris raised her blade. Ira drew her bow. And I felt it then, deep in my core. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to erase. Everything. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones, their intent was pure, merciless, and absolute. Not vengeance. Not conquest. Just, removal. As if our world was a stain on the page of some ancient ledger, and they had come to blot it out. The emberblade trembled in my grip, not with fear, but recognition. It pulsed wildly, shards within it flaring as if resisting the very pull of these hollow architects. Then it spoke, not with voice, but through memory. Visions rushed into me. A time long before ours. A world of stars aflame. A great rebellion of lesser beings, fireborn and fierce, who stole part of the Hallowed One's essence to craft a weapon, the Ember. A last defiance before their world was consumed. That weapon had found its way into our world. Buried. Forgotten. Until we rekindled it. We hadn't started a war. We had reignited one. The Hallowed surged forward. Saris shouted, if we die here, our world dies with us. No, I growled, stepping forward as the shards inside me burned hot and brighter than ever. We don't die here. I drove the emberblade into the stone beneath us. A ring of flame erupted, forming a barrier. The Hallowed recoiled, shrieking in thoughts that cracked the void. They fear it, Ira said. Not the blade. The memory of what it once was. And in that moment, I realized something. They were powerful. But they weren't invincible. And fire, when cornered, always fights back. The barrier flared around us, pulsing like a living heart. The Hallowed reeled in the face of it, not from pain, but from memory. This flame was not ours alone, it was the same defiant light that had once dared to resist them eons ago. They remembered. And for the first time, they hesitated. I seized the moment. Driving the emberblade deeper into the obsidian stone, I released the power bound inside me. Not all of it, just enough to ignite the truth that lay dormant in the shards Saris and Ira carried. Their eyes blazed gold, their weapons shimmered with the same primeval heat that once forged the Ember. We became something more in that moment. Not just wielders of flame. We became its living memory. The Hallowed struck again, faster now, furious. Tendrils of starbone and shadow whipped across the void. Saris deflected them with molten steel, Ira's arrows split the air like lightning, each one a spark that tore through their fleshless forms. I charged forward, the ember blade aflame with ancestral fury, and slashed through one of the hollowed. It didn't bleed. It didn't scream. It shattered. Cracks raced through its form, and then, nothing. It was gone. See? Saris called. They can fall. But I knew we couldn't kill them all. Not here. Not like this. There had to be another way. And then it struck me, what if the answer wasn't to destroy them, but to finish what the Fireborn had started? That was the only path forward. The ember blade pulsed in my hand, resonating with an ancient rhythm I'd never heard before. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a key. A final gift left behind by those who had dared to rebel against the Hollowed, not to win, but to leave a chance for someone else to, us. We can't destroy them, I said, turning to Saris and Ira as another wave of Hollowed began to encircle us. But we can seal them, forever. Ira narrowed her eyes. Back into the Ember world? No, I whispered. Inside it. Understanding bloomed across Saris's face. A new pact. I nodded. One final binding. One final bearer. The shards we had carried, the ones that had brought ruin and salvation in equal measure, began to lift from our armor, our weapons, our skin. They hovered between us, burning brighter, hotter, as if sensing the will behind our choice. It had to be all of us. Flame alone wasn't enough, it needed our resolve, our grief, our hope. We joined hands. The Hollowed charged, shrieking in shapes and screams and stars, but it was too late. Light burst from within us, not fire, but memory made manifest. The shards fused, folding reality inward like a flame curling into itself. I could feel the Hollowed being dragged inward, screaming without sound, unraveling not in pain but in inevitability. They were going home. To a prison reforged by our choice. The void cracked. The rift began to close. And in that final moment, as the blade dissolved in my hands and the stars faded into calm darkness, I saw the Fireborn once more. They didn't speak, they simply bowed. And then they were gone. The void unraveled into light, and the rift sealed behind us with a whisper, like the final breath of a long-forgotten god. Silence fell, not the cold silence of death, but the sacred stillness of something ended. I collapsed to my knees. The ember blade was no more, its hilt crumbled to ash in my hand. The shards had vanished, their purpose fulfilled. My body felt hollow, not weakened, but emptied, as if the fire inside had burned so brightly it had seared away everything that wasn't essential. Ira knelt beside me, one hand pressed to her heart. I can't hear it anymore, she said. The hum. The pull. It's all quiet. Saris only nodded. Her eyes, once hardened by war, shimmered with something softer now. Peace, perhaps. Or mourning. We had won. But the price had not yet fully revealed itself. When we returned through the fading remnants of the rift, we found our world had changed. Not shattered, but shifted. The flame keepers had survived. The cities still stood. But the skies looked different, and a strange calm hung over the land, as if even the wind remembered what had happened. People called us heroes. But I didn't feel like one. I felt like a messenger who had delivered something far greater than himself, and survived only by grace. At night, I sometimes see sparks dancing across the stars. And I wonder, did we save our world? Or did we light a beacon for something even greater? That question lingers with me still. Years have passed since the rift closed. The land has healed, forests regrown, cities rebuilt. The flame keepers now tend hearths, not battlefields. And the ember? A story now. A legend whispered beside fires, passed from lips to wide-eyed children as if it were myth. But I know better. I feel it in the quiet moments, in the hush before dawn, when the sky glows ember red. The fire isn't gone. It's watching, waiting, living in the memory of what we chose that day. And in the choices still to come. Ceres became a guardian of the northern ranges, her blade hung above the gate as a symbol, not of strength, but of restraint. Ira vanished into the deep woods, becoming one with the wilds. Some say she still watches the old paths, guiding wanderers to safety when the night grows too dark. And me? I returned to the village where it all began. The people welcomed me as a hero. I smiled, nodded, listened to their stories. But I never told them the truth, that the Emberblade was not a gift. It was a question. A question we answered with courage, and pain, and sacrifice. I keep a fire burning in my home, always. Not for warmth. Not for light. But as a promise. Because one day, another will rise. Another will carry the flame. And when they do, I want them to remember what we gave, and what we refused to surrender. Not power, but hope. So I write this now, for whoever finds it. The ember was never just a weapon. It was a pact. And as long as even one spark survives, the fire remains.